It's over, all over. Our biggest trump card has turned into a heap of scrap metal. That thing the radar locked onto has already climbed onto the deck and is now desperately tearing apart the phalanx CIWS. If you were here, one look would make you understand what true despair feels like. I'm currently crouched beneath the iron ladder on the second deck of the destroyer, my ears filled with the piercing screech of metal grinding against metal, pounding in my skull. Less than 5 meters above my head, the phalanx CIWS, which can normally intercept missiles, is now billowing thick black smoke. A massive black-boned hand is gripping the 6-gun barrels, glowing red from rapid fire. Its strength defies all logic. I stared wide-eyed as those specially crafted steel tubes, designed to withstand extreme temperatures and immense pressure, were flattened one by one in its grasp, then bent and twisted like plastic straws a child might use. Inside the CIWS mount, parts were slipping and snapping with sharp cracks. Then, a gush of black oil mixed with blinding sparks sprayed from the shattered casing, splattering onto my ballistic helmet with a sizzling sound. That hulking mass of flesh stood at the edge of the deck, just a few steps away from me. Its body was so heavy that every slight movement made the thousands of tons destroyer deck shudder, accompanied by the unnerving groans of steel plates warping. What I couldn't stand the most was its smell. It was a foul stench, like dredged-up mud from the depths of the sea, reeking of rot and decay. The wind carried it across the deck, straight in my nostrils. My stomach churned violently, acid rising to my throat, making it hard to breathe. I clamped a hand over my mouth, not daring to make a sound. Above me, the screech of twisting metal continued, the motor of the machine still spinning wildly, emitting a piercing whine. Flashes of fire illuminated the surroundings, casting the monster's enormous shadow over me. I didn't dare move, tears streaming from the stench, as I watched those massive gun barrels twist into mangled wrecks. Let me rewind to half an hour ago. Back then, our destroyer was on a routine patrol across the pitch-black sea. The wind was strong, cold against our faces. Suddenly, a strange signal appeared on the radar screen. It was moving incredibly fast, and it was underwater, heading straight for our ship's side. At first, everyone thought it was a malfunction or some lost giant creature. Then, the entire ship lurched violently. The force was indescribable. We couldn't keep our footing. Cups from the restroom tables and wrenches from toolboxes clattered to the steel floor, scattering everywhere. I scrambled up and followed the squad leader as we rushed to the deck to investigate. As soon as I reached the railing, I caught a strange odor. The sea surface began bubbling with dense, massive bubbles, gurgling as if a giant pot were boiling beneath. Each bubble burst with the stench of dead fish and rotting debris. A few of us shone powerful flashlights shakily into the water. The beams revealed a massive shadow underwater, larger than a truck, clinging to our hull and slowly climbing upward. The anti-rat shields and taut wire mesh along the ship's side, meant to deter sea creatures, were flattened under its pressure. The steel plates groaned and deformed inch by inch with a grating screech. The squad leader pulled back the bolt of his rifle with a sharp metallic click. He shouted at the top of his lungs, ordering us to scatter and establish defensive positions. Our hearts pounded, thinking we might have encountered some rare deep-sea monster or an unfortunate grounding incident. Several flashlight beams converged on the edge of the deck. We saw it clearly. A 3-meter-long, dark gray giant hand slammed onto the steel railing. Its skin was strange, covered in ring-like bony plates resembling tree rings. It had no fingernails, just 5 thick, stubby bone knuckles. With a sudden, powerful tug, the hand yanked downward. A deafening roar followed, and the entire thousands of tons ship listed sharply to the right, seawater even flooding onto the deck. The squad leader opened fire first, and we immediately followed suit with our rifles. A cacophony of gunfire erupted across the sea. Bullets struck the back of the monstrous hand, producing a rapid series of sharp cracks. Hot shell casings ejected one after another, clattering noisily against the steel deck. But eerily, Every bullet was deflected by the bony armor covering its body. The hand didn't even flinch, maintaining its iron grip on the railing as it steadily continued to climb. Then a massive spine covered in thick, bony plates slowly emerged from the dark seawater. The colossal creature had now fully climbed onto our deck. When its entire body was revealed, I felt as though I were watching a moving black rock formation. Its lower body was a dense cluster of short, thick bone segments, which scraped frantically against the hard steel deck, producing sharp, grating sounds and sending gray paint chips flying everywhere. The squad leader roared, his voice distorted by the sea wind. As he shouted, he dragged 2 comrades backward, and the 3 of them scrambled behind the fixed heavy machine gun on the starboard side. The squad leader gripped the machine gun's handles with both hands, his thumb slamming down on the firing button. Stan hat tat 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 tat. Asterisk, the heavy machine gun spat a half-meter-long tongue of flame. Large caliber bullets screamed through the air, pounding into the monster's body one after another. They struck the bony plates around its gaping maw, which was opening and closing rhythmically. The impacts produced blinding sparks, like a welder at work. Metal fragments scattered into the night sky, illuminating the surrounding deck. But the monstrosity showed no intention of stopping. Its thick, heavy armor remained unscathed, without even a dent. Then, one of its massive arms swung sideways. The arm was as thick as a utility pole, its reverse joint emitting a dull, brittle crack. It moved with unnerving speed, cutting through the air with a whooshing sound so forceful it rattled the visor on my helmet. The heavy machine gun steel mount was welded firmly to the deck. But as the massive arm swept past, a deafening crack echoed. The 3 sturdy steel supports snapped clean in 2. The squad leader and the 2 others had no time to react. The tremendous impact lifted them off their feet, sending them flying several meters through the air before crashing heavily against the anti-aircraft bulkhead behind them, solid steel plating. Standing nearby, I heard the sickening crunch of bones shattering as they hit the metal. They slid down limply, collapsing onto the steel deck. Their body armor was deeply dented and grotesquely deformed. They lay motionless, their rifles and dislodged machine gun parts clattering to the deck. As the ship swayed, the items rolled to the edge and plunged into the dark sea with a splash. The remaining soldiers' legs went weak at the sight. Shouting to keep firing, they desperately retreated. One of them slipped on the hot shell casings scattered across the deck, falling hard on his back. His weapon discharged uncontrollably, bullets rat-tat-tatting into the searchlight above. The searchlight shattered with a loud crack. Shards of glass rained down, pelting our faces and necks. The surroundings plunged into deeper darkness. The monster took a massive step forward. Its enormous feet stomped onto the deck, crushing the thick steel plate of the machine gun's shield flat against the surface. Black fragments continued to fall from its body. Another recruit beside me had run out of ammunition. Screaming in terror, he hurled his empty rifle at the creature. The weapon shattered against the bony armor, the plastic stock splintering into pieces. The monster didn't even glance at him, simply pushing forward. A nearby steel storage locker, filled with heavy chains and cables, was struck by the monster's bulk. The locker exploded, chains flying into the air and slamming into the hatch door, leaving fist-sized dents in the metal. I was crouched behind a ventilation duct, my hands gripping its edges so tightly my nails felt ready to snap. The massive iron pipe shuddered violently in my arms as the creature moved toward me. Its shadow blotted out the moonlight above, and the stench of rotting fish grew thicker, clawing down my throat and stinging my eyes. The alarm on the deck still wailed. Red emergency lights flashed across the creature's side, revealing bony plates vibrating at a strange frequency, clicking like 1,000 pairs of scissors shearing through tin. One of my comrades was crawling toward me, his leg wounded, dragging himself forward with both hands gripping the deck's protrusions. His fingertips scraped dark streaks across the steel. The creature's second massive arm moved, not toward my comrade, but smashing into the second-level observation deck above us. The structure, built from steel bars and mesh, crumpled with a teeth-grinding screech. Tons of framework crashed onto the deck with a deafening clang, completely blocking my comrade's retreat. Sparks and the crackle of short-circuited wires flew through the darkness, some landing on my clothes and burning black holes. I stared at the heap of twisted metal and the giant, bone-plated foot shifting slowly within the wreckage. The collapsed framework slammed onto the deck, kicking up a cloud of dark dust. Just then, the charging monster suddenly froze. It stood rigidly in the center of the deck. The thick, dark bony plates covering its body began to open and close rhythmically, click-clack, like the grinding gears of a rusted machine. Its four thick arms hung limp against the steel deck. Seeing it motionless, the rest of us scrambled toward the hatch. A few alert soldiers gritted their teeth, hauling the wounded by their collars one by one behind the hatch. Our boots crunched over shattered glass and spent casings, but no one cared anymore. We thought it had been hurt by the heavy machine gun fire. Even a block of iron would react to that many large caliber rounds. Some whispered that this thing had crawled from the deep sea and, out of its element, might just die on its own. Crouched behind the duct, I stared at the creature's feet. A thick, black, tar-like fluid began oozing from beneath its body, glistening under the red emergency lights. The viscous liquid seeped slowly across the deck. When it touched the scorching hot machine gun casings, it hissed sharply. I noticed something. The brass casings soaked in the fluid were changing. They darkened first, then softened like melting plastic, finally collapsing and merging with the black ooze. Not just the casings. Even the thick gray anti-slip paint on the deck dissolved like water upon contact, revealing the silvery steel beneath. Suddenly, my earpiece crackled to life. The deputy commander's voice shouted through the static, urgent and strained. He ordered everyone to take cover behind the thickest barriers available. Over the radio, he explained that technicians in the operations room had restored backup power and were remotely rebooting the automated close-in weapon system. Once that beast of a gun opened fire, its dozens of armor-piercing rounds per second would tear the creature's shell to shreds. Hearing this, the soldiers behind the hatch breathed a slight sigh of relief. But as I watched the melting steel casings, a deep unease settled in my gut. Everything fell eerily quiet. Only the wind whistling through the broken framework and the creature's rhythmic clicking broke the silence. The damaged searchlight flickered intermittently, stretching the monster's shadow across the bulkhead, swelling one moment, shrinking the next. The stench of rotting fish and shrimp seemed to be fading, replaced by a strange, burnt odor. The monster's body began to tilt forward slightly, its large, circular mouth covered in bony plates slowly aligning with the rotating close-in weapon system turret above our heads. More and more black mucus oozed from its body, pooling into a dark, viscous puddle at its feet. Above, the phalanx CIWS emitted a rumbling vibration. Its white, dome-shaped radar housing spun rapidly, locking firmly onto the massive, fleshy mound in the center of the deck. Then, dozens of armor-piercing rounds per second spewed forth. The specially designed bullets formed a relentless, downward-pressing orange-red whip of fire in the air. With a piercing shriek, this whip of flame lashed violently against the monster's chest. Intense bursts of explosive light instantly illuminated most of the deck. The armor-piercing rounds struck its protruding, hardened bony carapace, erupting in blinding flashes of metallic sparks. The deafening roar of the gunfire drowned out the sound of the surrounding waves. Under the kinetic impact of the dense barrage, the two-story-tall behemoth began to experience an intense, high-frequency physical tremor. The bony plates covering its body shook violently, and even the pool of black mucus beneath its feet churned and emitted billowing white smoke from the immense shock waves. The acrid, burnt smell of the smoke drifted across the deck. The armor-piercing rounds, capable of piercing tank armor with ease, left wounds no deeper than a centimeter in its dark, hardened carapace. Countless bullets, heated to a glowing red from the intense friction, turned the monster's chest into an unnatural, luminous dark red. Undeterred by the relentless whip of fire, the monster lifted one of its thick legs, densely packed with short, stubby bone segments, and took a massive step forward. Its heavy foot landed on the thick steel deck with a dull thud. Due to the immense impact force of the bullets, each step it took left deep indentations in the hard steel. The supporting I-beams beneath the deck groaned and creaked under the tremendous pressure on the verge of snapping. It marched straight through the dense hail of gunfire until it stood directly beneath the CIWS turret. Suddenly, the creature reared its upper body. It extended two massive arms, thick as solid utility poles and covered in reverse-jointed segments, and thrust them straight into the protective housing of the close-in weapon system. The thick fiberglass shield shattered like paper under its grip, breaking into countless tiny plastic fragments. Inside, the high-powered motor continued to spin wildly, emitting a piercing whine. One of the monster's massive hands clamped down on the 6 rapidly rotating gun barrels. Then, a sound that sent shivers down the spine erupted. The screech of red-hot, specialized steel tubes grinding violently within the monster's grasp. With unnatural strength, its 5 bony fingers squeezed inward. Crouched beneath the ventilation duct, I watched clearly as the 6 gun barrels, designed to withstand thousands of degrees of heat, began to thin, deform, and were finally twisted and snapped like noodles, one after another. Inside the turret, the internal transmission gears, jammed by the sudden seizure of the barrels, shattered one after another. Countless metal shards and broken gear washers exploded from the machine's seams, pelting the nearby steel walls and leaving a dense pattern of small pits. Thick black smoke began to pour from the entire CIWS turret. Oil and sparks from short-circuited wiring splattered across the deck. The thousands of horsepower motor choked, smoked, and seized, causing the entire machine to fall completely silent. The only heavy, suppressive firepower on the deck was now a pile of scrap metal. The monster released the gun barrels, now twisted into spirals. The heap of scrap fell to the deck with a clatter. It lowered its massive, eyeless, noseless head. The enormous mouth that occupied half its body slowly began to open. Inside, several rings of interlocking bony plates like the blades of a meat grinder started to rotate, one clockwise, the next counterclockwise, emitting a series of sharp, clacking sounds. The pool of black mucus at its feet, which had melted the deck's paint, had already flowed through the drainage holes into the lower compartments. I could hear the sizzling sound of steel plates melting and warping, echoing from beneath the deck's metal plating. Behind the broken steel framework, several sailors who had thought themselves safe stood frozen, staring in disbelief. The rifles in their hands remained silent. Not a single shot fired in that moment. All the backup searchlights around me went out in an instant. The entire starboard deck of the destroyer plunged into deathly darkness, with only the lingering sparks from the CIWS mount still flickering and smoking. The monster's 4 massive arms pressed against the steel deck, its body crouched low, the bony joints in its hindquarters crackling like a string of firecrackers. It aimed its large, bony-plated mouth at the soldiers hiding behind the foremost hatch. The 3 soldiers, sheltering behind the frontmost steel hatch, had completely lost their nerve. One young man, his face drenched in sweat, suddenly let out a piercing scream. He flung aside his empty rifle and stumbled backward, his head slamming hard against the steel doorframe behind him with a heavy thud. Ignoring the pain, he flailed his arms wildly in the air, his feet kicking up shards of glass that crunched and scattered across the deck. Screaming his mother's name, he turned and desperately clawed at the already jammed steel hatch. His fingernails scraped frantically against the rough anti-rust paint, producing a series of unnerving screeches. In just a few strokes, his nails were torn back, leaving dark, smeared streaks on the gray paint. He seemed oblivious to the pain, continuing to scratch at the door with his raw fingers. Another soldier, his face smeared with grime, aimed his rifle at the nearby twisted steel railing, his finger locked on the trigger. The rifle rattled as bullets sprayed into empty space, spent casings bouncing one after another onto his face, searing black marks onto his thighs. As he fired, he repeatedly slammed his head against a nearby steel pillar. Thud, 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 each impact knocking his helmet askew. When the ammunition ran out and the rifle clicked empty, he kept his eyes shut, still frantically squeezing the trigger. The 2-story-tall black mountain of flesh shifted. It stretched out an arm and swatted the forward observation post pillar. The solid steel pipe, as thick as a thigh, snapped like it was made of dough, breaking cleanly in two. Tons of steel framework, along with tangled wires and rubber, came crashing down. The impact shook the iron ladder beneath me, jolting it upward. The already warped hatch, along with the soldiers clawing and banging their heads, was instantly buried under the collapsing steel wreckage. I could hear muffled, frantic cries from beneath the debris. The monster's 4 reverse-jointed arms pressed down on the deck simultaneously, the bones beneath its body emitting a rapid series of cracks. It pushed forward, cutting me off from my trapped comrades. The stench of rotting fish and decay emanating from it now mingled with the acrid smell of burnt machinery, growing even more overpowering. I lay flat in the narrow space beneath the iron ladder. My right hand brushed against something heavy on the steel plating beside me. I tugged hard, pulling the object free from a tangle of scattered cables. It was a man-portable anti-aircraft missile launcher, normally stored locked in a dedicated weapons case. It must have been flung from the second deck storage compartment during the ship's violent shaking. I gripped the heavy green tube with both hands. It was coated in a thick, slippery black slime. The substance seared my palms, sending up wisps of white smoke and emitting a sharp, sizzling sound. The pain shot through half my body, making me tremble. I didn't wipe the slime away, just roughly rubbed my palms on my sleeve, then braced the launcher stock firmly against my left shoulder. The disabled CIWS mount continued to shower sparks. The red emergency lights flickered past, illuminating the monster's back. Amidst its broad, dark, hardened bony carapace, one spot stood out. It was the area that had been relentlessly pounded by hundreds of armor-piercing rounds from the CIWS. That small section of bone was now glowing red-hot, like iron fresh from a forge, still steaming faintly. Within the reddened bone, cracks as thick as fingers had already begun to form. I knew this might be my only chance. If I didn't act now, once it crushed everyone left on the deck, the lower compartments would be dissolved by the black slime oozing from its body. I gritted my teeth, crawling forward inch by inch from beneath the narrow iron ladder, using both hands and feet. My knees and elbows scraped desperately over the scattered iron fragments and brass shell casings littering the ground. My pants had long since been torn to shreds, and the iron shards dug painfully into my flesh. I paid no mind to any of it, my eyes fixed unwaveringly on that glowing red bony shell. The massive creature was leaning forward, its huge palms pressed against the collapsed iron frame, completely unaware of me crouching behind it. I crawled to a broken iron pillar only about 7 or 8 steps away from it. I rested the thick missile launcher on a notch in the pillar, my right finger tightly gripping the green plastic trigger. The sight at the top of the launcher was shattered, filled with glass shards, making it impossible to see anything. I simply tilted my head to the side, aiming directly along the scorching barrel with my naked eye. The creature's back was enormous, the glowing, cracked, bony shell flickering in the darkness like a red target embedded in its spine. The bony plates on its body were still clacking open and shut. A sudden sea gust blew a cloud of black smoke directly into my eyes, stinging so badly that tears streamed down my face. I blinked hard, forcing the tears from my vision. The black slime in my palm continued to melt, and my fingers were nearly losing their grip on the plastic handle. I braced my feet firmly against a raised section of the deck behind me, leaning forward to press all my strength into the missile launcher. I opened my mouth wide, my thumb forcefully flicking the safety switch. Clenching my teeth, I aimed my right index finger at the green missile trigger and pulled it all the way down. Boom! The deafening roar exploded right beside my ear. A massive wave of scorching heat blasted from the rear of the launcher, the force so immense it hurled me clear from behind the iron pillar. I tumbled several times across the hard steel deck, my head slamming violently against a nearby iron railing. My helmet flew off, plunging into the pitch-black seawater with a loud splash. The shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missile, at such close range, struck dead center on the creature's glowing red bony shell. A blinding fireball erupted violently on the creature's back. The flames illuminated the surrounding deck for several meters as brightly as daylight. The tremendous explosive force generated a powerful shockwave, lifting scattered brass casings, iron fragments, and twisted pieces of the close-in weapon system into the air like rain, pelting the distant bulkhead with a chaotic clatter. The red bony shell, already cracked from hundreds of armor-piercing rounds, finally gave way under the missile's immense power. With a sharp crack, the thick armor shattered into dozens of black, hard fragments of varying sizes, scattering in all directions. Some pieces struck the steel deck, leaving fist-sized dents. With the bony shell destroyed, the true nature of the creature's back was fully exposed. There lay a mass of thick, tar-like black flesh, sticky and continuously billowing thick white smoke. The stench of rotting fish and decay intensified 100-fold in that moment, carried by the blast's hot wind straight into my face. The 2-story tall behemoth let out a deep, guttural roar. The sound was so powerful it vibrated the entire destroyer's steel plates, unlike anything a living creature could produce. More like 2 massive, tens of thousands ton steel freighters colliding violently at sea. Its pair of externally mounted, reverse-jointed arms suddenly released the collapsed iron frame ahead, abandoning the soldiers trapped beneath. Its enormous body slowly turned on the deck. The dense cluster of short, thick bone joints on its lower half scrambled frantically across the steel deck, producing a series of ear-piercing screeches like nails on a chalkboard. With each movement, broken bone fragments scraped deep white marks into the steel. Shifting its boulder-like form, it turned to face me, its massive mouth occupying half its body, now aimed directly at me. Inside that circular maw, several rings of thick bony plates spun rapidly in alternating directions. The black slime oozing from its body splattered everywhere as it turned, landing on the steel deck and melting the gray paint, releasing wisps of acrid black smoke. One of the creature's massive arms suddenly rose. That giant hand, covered in steel-like hard plates, swept through the air with a foul gust, aiming straight for where I lay and striking down with brutal force. At that moment, I couldn't stand up at all. The right side of my body was numb and tingling from the recoil of the missile. I could only prop myself up with my left hand, desperately dragging myself backward by my hips. Asterisk thud. Asterisk that massive black hand slammed in the steel deck just inches from my toes. The 2-centimeter thick special steel plate shattered under the impact, the metal peeling back in all directions to reveal the dark, gaping lower deck below. The steel pillar I had been lying against was crushed out of shape by the blow, its upper section shearing off and hurtling through the air before smashing into the radar antenna on the second deck, sending a shower of sparks flying. Missing its target, the enormous arm dug its 5 thick, bony fingers into the torn edge of the steel plate, the knuckles cracking loudly. With a powerful heave, it dragged its entire body forward. Now its towering, 2-story-high shadow completely engulfed me. Lying beneath that darkness, I couldn't even see the sky above. The black, fleshy mass of its body began to convulse violently, and the bony blades inside its gaping maw spun faster and faster, roaring like a high-speed industrial shredder. Frantically, I swept my left hand across the deck, hoping to find a rifle or a steel pipe. But all I felt were scorching shell casings and shards of broken glass. The glass dug into my palm, drawing blood that mixed with the black ooze on the deck into a sticky mess. The monster lifted its massive foot, covered in dents, tiny bone spikes. Slowly, it raised a foot above my head, dripping tar-like slime. A drop of the slime splattered onto my chest. The moment it touched my outermost bulletproof vest, the material began to smoke and soften, filling my nostrils with the acrid smell of burning plastic. The skin beneath felt seared, as if on fire. I kicked my feet desperately against the deck, trying to push myself back, but my back was already pressed against the solid, cold steel of the anti-aircraft bulkhead. There was nowhere left to retreat. The monster's foot began to descend. I watched, helpless, as that spike-covered sole drew closer and closer to my face. The foul breath from its mouth blew my hair flat against my skull. Just as the foot was less than half a meter from my forehead, the bulkhead behind me shuddered violently. Asteriskboom. Asterisk, a deafening roar, several times louder than the missile explosion, erupted from directly above us. The destroyer's forward main gun had fired. A heavy, high-explosive shell, trailing a long white streak, cut a blinding arc through the darkness, skimming the edge of the second deck before slamming squarely into the monster's left side. A violent explosion erupted at its waist. A fireball several meters in diameter burst forth, its intense glow painting the monster's gaping maw a fiery red. The sheer force of the blast tore away a huge chunk of the thick bone armor and the black flesh beneath from its left side. Countless black fragments and shattered bone shards rained down in all directions. Some struck my stomach, making me gag as if I might vomit up my last meal. Under the direct hit from a main gun's high-explosive shell, the monster's massive, multi-ton frame could no longer hold its balance. Its four reverse-jointed arms flailed wildly in the air, tearing through nearby wire mesh and entire sections of railing. The ship lurched sharply to port, seawater surging onto the deck. The monster's foot scraped one last, ear-piercing screech across the deformed steel. Losing its balance, its colossal body toppled like a collapsing wall, crashing with a heavy thud into the pitch-black sea down the sloping deck. The impact sent a towering white wave several meters high surging upward. Tons of seawater poured down onto the deck like rain, extinguishing all the scattered sparks. The deluge crashed over me, drenching me completely. Lying on the cold steel deck, I gasped for air. My right arm was completely useless now. The slightest movement sent searing pain shooting through the bones, likely shattered by the main gun's immense shockwave. Both my palms were slick with blood, shards of glass still embedded deep in the flesh. Thick, lingering smoke filled the air on all sides. The densely arrayed close-in weapon system was now a complete wreck. 6 specialized steel barrels twisted together like a rope, with wires and mangled gears inside the base still crackling and sparking. Nearby, sections of the iron railing had snapped into pieces, sharp metal rods jutting upward toward the sky. Beneath a steel frame not far away, several comrades were helping each other crawl out. Their uniforms were torn to shreds, their faces smeared with dark, greasy oil. On the sea surface, aside from a vast expanse of thick, viscous black fluid and swirling rings of white smoke, the 2-story-tall black mountain of flesh from moments ago had vanished without a trace. Dozens of shattered black bone fragments littered the deck, each as large as a palm, their edges sharp as blades. Some were embedded in the dents and craters of the deck plating. From the direction of the lower deck's hatch, a continuous sizzling sound still echoed. The black mucus had already melted several large holes through the centimeter-thick steel plates, with dark smoke billowing out through the openings. With my left hand, I clawed desperately at the steel deck beneath me, struggling to sit up. Just then, a medic carrying a medical kit and stepping over scattered brass shell casings hurried toward me. And it was at that very moment I suddenly heard a faint sound. The sound came from beneath the heavy hull of the ship, below where I lay. Deep within the cold, dead weight of the lower steel plates, something was using sharp, hard bone-like stakes to scrape. Once, then again, with immense heaviness against the lowest layer of the ship's hull plating. Asterisk clack. Asterisk, asterisk clack. Asterisk.